Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I got a full house. Welcome tonight, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, guys?
The Premier League back for the second game week this weekend, and so we're going to preview the biggest games taking place this weekend. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseup_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys to get involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, so we are welcoming back Gio for this podcast, and of course, we have to go straight into the first game that we'll preview. Brighton versus Manchester United. Both teams, Gio, coming off of a win on the first weekend of the Premier League 2024-2025 season. Brighton beat Everton 3-0 away, and Man U beat Fulham 1-0 at home, of course, the opening game of this season. Both teams look kind of new, and I guess impressive considering they both got a result. Gio, what are your, predictions and expectations from, this new look Man U side? Since we didn't hear from you last time.
I think obviously you, as a Man U fan, you kind of accept the win and kind of move on. Say it's the first game of the season, but arguably, I think Brighton looked better from, say, in open play going forward. Obviously, they just. Not that they looked more dangerous. I don't think Brighton are necessarily more dangerous, but they are just more consistent with putting away their chances. And we saw it. Matoma was injured quite a bit last season, on and off throughout the year. But for him to come back in the first game and get a goal, albeit a tap in, it was a great transitional play, and it was great. It was great form from Brighton. Typical Brighton fashion, even with all the players that they've lost, and the few that they did bring in, could be that James Milner effect, but always playing in that winning culture. But the fact of the matter is, Brighton looked smoother than Man U, given Man U's star power. It didn't look as good as Brighton's, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Okay, Brighton, I think. Easy to say they looked impressive considering their opposition beat Everton 3-0. Everton had a red card. Mac, we did briefly discuss that game in our previous podcast. Based on that, is it maybe too early to see that Brighton have kind of gone on and improved on what they did last season, considering they did have a couple of new signings? I think their right winger who started was a new signing, Minte, and of course, more recently they signed Jorginho Rutter from Leeds for quite a big fee, actually. Rutter actually joined Leeds not too long ago in the championship, and so could this be a new start for Brighton and of course, their new manager looking to impress, or is it too soon? And can Man U get a positive result here? What do you think?
So, in terms of, let's start off with the odds makers here. And Brighton is actually slightly favored with a 38% chance to win compared to Manchester United's 36% chance. So, it's a fairly even toss-up between the two. But it's a slight edge for Brighton, probably because they're the home team in all actuality. But for both these teams, I think they're in transitional moments with Manchester United recruiting kind of how they wanted to improve their squad, how they wanted to. You should see a little bit more maybe settled in, where maybe do we see De Ligt start alongside Marazari this coming weekend, quite potentially. Do we see any changes in the midfield? Ugarte still has not crossed the finish line for them, so they still haven't gone through their full evolution as a team. Similarly for Brighton, under new manager Herzeller, who just came up. I think he took his respective club out of the second tier of the Bundesliga of the German league and brought them up, and immediately made the switch over. And I was reading a fun stat actually of how young he is. He is, I think he's 34. There are 3 players in the starting lineup for Brighton from last week who are actually older than their manager. And that'll be Danny Welbeck, Lewis Dunk, and Milner, actually. I think also Veltman, so it might have been 4. So you're talking about a team where their whole concept has been recently changed, where you have a lot of players kind of in the last stages of their career, a lot of players at the beginning of their career, with full of excitement. And Minta, who was the recent signing over the weekend, He has been touted by a lot of players of Gambian nationality coming in, a lot of pace, a lot of creativity, a lot of technical ability as well, where he could be an up-and-coming star in the Premier League. So for me, it's really tough to say because we're talking about two different stages with these two teams who are going to be very, very different than last year, but because they haven't gone through the full transformations, have a lot of leftovers in a lot of ways, right? So for me, if I were to be looking at who naturally would be the favorites, I think it's going to be up to Manchester United's press going into this game and how well Brighton can get through it. We know that Manchester United, they're going to play in transitional moments, and if Brighton are able to break them down quickly, efficiently, and get into the final third without making too many mistakes, I think you can get at this Manchester United midfield. They definitely have a soft underbelly there, which is why they're looking to strengthen that area of the pitch. But if Manchester United's forward line does a good enough job kind of denying spaces in the middle of the pitch to get players like João Pedro on the ball in this previous match week, or Daniel Welbeck when he's playing as striker likes to drop in, those areas of the pitch, if they can deny the ball there and prevent Brighton from getting out, that's where Manchester United should be at their advantage on a Brighton mistake, who they have been known to kind of shoot themselves in the foot. But I think the odds makers have it spot on. It should be a coin toss. I think people were probably a little bit too low on Brighton because they didn't come up to expectations last year. With all the changes, maybe people are viewing them as outside the top 10, but I think they're very much in that 4 to 10 range with a lot of other teams. So, because they have such exciting talent. So, yeah, I'm saying all this to say it's a toss-up. I'm very excited to see what happens, but we're going to learn a lot about both these teams coming out from this match game, which it's so evenly matched.
Yeah, and we're just going to read out the previous results. Most recently, Man U did beat Brighton 2-0 at the Amex Stadium last season, but Brighton did beat Man U early last season at the Old Trafford, and so they split the, I guess, series there just last season. This weekend, though, it's going to be an interesting watch, like you said, Mac, in terms of denying space and seeing how the forward players for Brighton play. On the flip side, not sure how Man U are going to line up as well. Of course, we saw Xerxes coming on and scoring a goal late on, but they did start with Bruno Fernandes, I believe, as a striker. And if they're looking to play in transition against a Brighton team who kind of want to keep possession and draw the opposition in, I guess that fits the mold for Man U, and the game plan is pretty much set there. So I want to hear, Gio, how what your opinion is, Gio, in terms of if Man U sets up more defensively, letting Brighton have the ball at home, and then trying to hit them on the break, which they were successful in a lot of times last season. Well, how do you think that game plan will play out?
I think that ideally is the game plan. Knowing how Brighton kind of pummeled them last season against with their counterattack, I think it only makes sense that they sit a little deeper and kind of play Brighton's game, well, the Zerbi's game against them this time around. But with that being said, do I think, with that being said, if they do drop back and play a little bit of a more counterattacking style, do I think Bruno should start up at striker? No, I do not. I think he should come a little deeper. Based on transition, based on, the long passes that he's capable to do, I think he's much better suited in a deeper role. Maybe Mason Mount doesn't get the start this time around, and Bruno slots into that role. But definitely don't want to see him out there. Definitely would like to see, maybe start Xerxes. If they are on a counter, at least he's a big enough body that, can hold up the play very well, and is able to kind of lay off to, say, a trailing Marcus Rashford, a trailing Garnacho, whatever the case may be, a trailing Bruno Fernandes even. So if you have those finishers around the goal, I'm much more confident than, say, Bruno is in front of the goal, kind of wasting away his minutes up there alone.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Ahmad Diallo started the game for Man U at home against Fulham, but I'm not sure if it'll be Garnacho that takes a spot, will Rashford even be starting on the left-hand side there. I think it's still a toss-up for what type of team Ten Hag will pick, and that's really going to inform us how the game will go. But we'll, of course, keep an eye out on that one. Mac, final thoughts on that game?
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to be able to talk about in this game is where, just like I had mentioned, in terms of maybe the soft underbelly you're going to experience from Manchester United, I actually look at it, maybe that's a potential strength in some cases for this matchup, because I would argue that's the area of the pitch Brighton still haven't done enough reinvestment in. Where in the previous game they started Weaver, who's a new signing from Feyenoord, so he actually played under Arne Slot last year, and then also James Milner in midfield, because Billy Gilmore was rumored to be exited from the club, and it looks like he is going to Napoli. So for them as well, where they even had to start their traditional number 9 striker as a 10 in their previous matchup, I think in terms of what we're talking about how Manchester United, if they do sit back and allow a player new to the Premier League, James Milner, very experienced, but definitely on the latter stages of his career, if they, we'll allow you guys to dictate the game, we're just going to not make sure that Matoma could be in space, Minta could be in space, a Dinger, if he starts, can get into space, stuff like that. If they can avoid those areas of the pitches and keep it as much into their pivot players, I think that's where Manchester United will probably be. We can allow them to dictate, control the play. Let's deny the pass into the final third as much as possible, and that's where they should win out. Instead of, I guess, assuming so much pressure and allowing one-on-one battles out wide. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of the shape for Manchester United going into the game.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I think, whoever gets a win, if there's a winner here, will be, of course, well on their way to getting their fans sort of back on their side, and then hopefully pushing for a good run of form starting very early on. Let's flip over then, Mac, to the next game that we're going to preview, Aston Villa versus Arsenal. Both teams coming off of a win on the first weekend as well. Villa beat West Ham 2-1 at the London Stadium, whereas Arsenal beat Wolves 2-0 at home. Now, this is a newish Aston Villa team that we're seeing. There are some changes here and there, but same old Arsenal, I would say, and most of us, I think, could agree, that we saw from last year and kind of expect moving forward. What do you think will take place, though? Because Aston Villa last season did the double over Arsenal, and so will Arsenal be looking to change their style of play, or do you think it's just more Mikel Arteta is going to be hounding his players to make sure that they go out there and perform and get all 3 points?
I think this is going to be very much a on revenge tour type of game for Arsenal. I think that as soon as the schedule came out, this is one that they have pinned on their calendar, and definitely had a start beside it where they need to come out and perform, because they not just got the double, that was 40% of their total losses last year in the Premier League, so 2 of their 5. In addition, Aston Villa won 5 of their last 9 matches against Arsenal. So this seems like ever since the Javier Martinez signing, this has been a thorn in Arsenal's side, because those timelines do correlate. And even though Arsenal fans may get a lot of joy for some of Martinez's antics, I don't think that they particularly enjoy when he's playing against Arsenal. So for me, that is a game, like I said, that they have starred, but also it's definitely going to be a statement, because from now on in for Arsenal for the next 4 games in the Premier League, they play at Aston Villa, then home to Brighton, then away at Tottenham, then away at Manchester City. So their terms of their next 4 games, I think, is very much going to dictate, are they in that title conversation, or very much going to be quickly filtering out where, okay, what's happening with Arteta if this team doesn't come out in a strong position after that difficult start. So this is the first one of those dominoes really to be able to kind of tackle. So for this game, I think it's going to be very much similar to what we actually saw last week from Arsenal. We're not going to see too much shift of changes. The only question I would have is about Zinchenko. Does he play? Considering now you have more time for Jurgen Timber to be able to step in, you're probably a little bit more worried about the offensive threat Aston Villa can put out. Maybe you want more of a solidified back line. And Zinchenko, that's definitely an area of the pitch where he can be a little bit sussed out as. So aside from that, I think business as usual, expecting a better result going into this game. Whereas Aston Villa, for them, I think this is also, again, it's going to be a tough fixture for them, but they are set up in one of the fewer teams in the Premier League where, but with a striker like Ollie Watkins, a lot of pace on the wing, where as Arsenal kind of collapse in and kind of try to suffocate you, they're able, with their pace, is to give them enough breathing room to get in behind and use their abilities to be able to kind of hit teams on the counter. And one of the best teams in the league at that. So very fascinated to see what happens, but I think we should see Arsenal come back for that kind of that revenge battle in this fixture.
For sure. They're definitely going to be having that fresh result in the back of a lot of those players that even started in that game in I believe April. Something that's going to be fueling them to play well and get all 3 points here. But of course, Gio Villa did play well in both these fixtures last season, and also, if I'm not mistaken, against Man City and Liverpool, they held their own last season too. So seems like something Mikel Arteta, Unai Emery does really well against top clubs in the Premier League. I think he's not gonna have a problem facing one of his old teams as well and getting those players fired up. So, how do you see this game playing out?
Again, just to start off, definitely game of the weekend, for sure. It's gonna be probably, it's an early test for both teams. It's kind of a litmus test for both teams. Obviously, Villa coming off a great season, and then Arsenal, higher aspirations. I think we talked about, for last week at least, them coming out and having to kind of prove themselves early, and they should come out looking very dominant. Arguably they could have looked better. A 2-0 win against Wolves, we get it. But to get Kai Havertz and Bukayo Saka, your key guys, goals early on in the season, I think is a great job done there. And just from watching the game, apart from the occasional Wolves chance every a half hour or so, they didn't really generate much, which again is a great time. And I think obviously inclusive of Thomas Partey, even considerably, he was a player that could have been exited out of the club this summer. Hasn't gone yet. Came in, had some key passes in the game that really led to some good opportunities. Again, great for Arsenal. But Villa, I think what they did last week, losing the league, coming back, and then winning it, I think is very important as well. It shows the grit, shows the fight, and just the eagerness to want to come back and win and kind of prove themselves again this season. And I think, again, with the new signings, they are a different team. They are a better team. So Arsenal's got, they had a great game last week, but I don't think they can let up any much more this week. And again, it's going to come down to how they possess the ball, because I think they still are the favorites going in, but it's going to come down to how Arteta really sets the team up in this one, knowing Villa has a much stronger midfield going into the season, and again, Ollie Watkins coming off decent Euro Cup. The confidence is there, so he's going to look to score and score often.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you pointed out the midfield, because the midfield players that Aston Villa could line up with are, of course, Amadou Onana, recent signing, big money signing, which I like very much for Aston Villa. Yuri Tielemans, a player that was previously linked with Arsenal, and of course they have John McGinn, Jacob Ramsey, among others that could be make it hard for Arsenal to sort of get into their style and rhythm with possession as a combative midfield. And on the flip side, Mac already pointed out the threat on the wings and from Ollie Watkins. It's going to be a big match for Aston Villa as well, because they are in the Champions League this year. They, of course, want to make a case and lay down a marker against a fellow championship side, Champions League team in Arsenal. And what better way to get your team morale, and of course those players challenging for positions, with John Duran coming on and making a good impact against West Ham. So fighting for a spot with Ollie Watkins for there. Going to be interesting to see what happens there. Final thoughts on how this could play out, Matt?
The only thing I'm looking at is how well Aston Villa do, in terms of the last piece that I wanted to be able to talk about, is how well Aston Villa do on the ball. Because a big piece to their success over the last couple of seasons was Douglas Luiz, who no longer plays for the club. So even though you're talking about like Amadou Onana being able to step into that midfield, he's not a Douglas Luiz in possession. He offers different talent, he has different abilities, but it's a different type of player where he very much, that architect has not been replaced in terms of kind of being that six, picking out the ball from the back line and kind of settling things down and getting them out into the final third. So And that was a player, even though a lot of the highlights go to an Ollie Watkins or Martinez, and deservedly so. For me, I think their best player last season was actually Douglas Luiz. So this will be their first test really without him, and seeing if they can still manage in the midfield with that kind of, I would argue, regression there. So again, that would be an area of the pitch Arsenal I think may take advantage of, but we'll see how Aston Villa adjusts and when playing against a stiffer competition, considering their changes.
Yeah, so another one to watch, and now that we're talking about it more, definitely what Gio said, the match of the weekend. We'll keep an eye out for that, and of course we'll be discussing that in our next podcast. Let's take a quick break here, boys, and we'll be back covering some more games taking place this weekend. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Also Footy, guys. We are going to continue now previewing the next game for this weekend's Premier League matches, and that's, of course, Crystal Palace versus West Ham. Now, we briefly mentioned Crystal Palace, I think, Mac, you and I, in our last podcast, but I think a lot has been left unsaid with, I guess, how unlucky they were to have that as a goal disallowed, but also they did get a poor result against Brentford. They're going to look to bounce back, and they're facing West Ham, who themselves coming off of a similar result, 2-1 loss this weekend. Both teams will be looking to get back on winning ways, and of course get the first win of the season. I'm going to be looking more so though for Crystal Palace, because even though they did finish the season quite well last year, the way they are sort of lining up and some of those changes that are going to be happening, there's a lot of eyes on Mark Guehi, Joachim Andersen as well. Both players already very much linked with moves away. Joachim Andersen more so closer to being done at Fulham. And it looks like a lot of the weight will be falling again on Eze to sort of create and be the more positive outlook for Crystal Palace moving this forward this season. And they have the crowd with them this game, though I think it's going to be a tough one. A lot of uncertainty with their back line, which will give West Ham some confidence going into this one. I'm not necessarily liking the Crystal Palace chances, and I think West Ham were unlucky in a sense to not come away with a tie in the last game against Aston Villa. So I'm predicting here more so, Gio, a win for West Ham. Do you think I'm sort of in the right track here, or do you think it's more evenly matched here?
I definitely think it is a favorite for a West Ham win. Life without Olise is slowly becoming more and more reality and more harsh for them, because it takes a whole side away from them. From their attack, which so many Premier League teams had to respect Olise, and not be able to push as high up on the field, like against Palace. Losing Zaha, losing Olise, in the last few years has been tough for them. There are rumors about possibly getting Zaha back, but things aren't looking too hot over there. But I just don't think they have that firepower anymore to solely be able to earn that respect from teams, for them not to be pressed up against, which I think teams will take advantage of. And I think West Ham is one of those teams which they have decent speed, they have decent finishing up top, they have good pace on the wings, and they will exploit that. They will try to press up a little higher early on, try to win that ball early, and try to get some goals early. But I do think West Ham are the favorites, and if I were a betting man, I would bet on West Ham this weekend.
Yeah, Mac, kind of both agreeing here.
You are a betting man. What are you doing? If you were
could we bet on Mac Nicholas Fulkrug getting his first Premier League goal this game? Okay. What do you think then?
I'm on the complete other end of the spectrum from both of you. I think actually Palace should be the favorites for this game. In their last matchup, Palace won 5-2 against West Ham. I understand Elisa played in that game. I think he scored 2 goals. Mateta had 2 goals, and Eze had 1. And I think if we're talking about a team that probably felt most undeserved of the result from their past weekend, it was Crystal Palace, where even the referee, after making the call as a free kick, came up and apologized and immediately said, "My fault. I made the mistake." And I appreciate that transparency, where if that kind of gone in, Brentford, I think, if I recall correctly, scored immediately right afterwards. So that result completely would have flipped in the head and we would have a different belief of Palace going into this fixture. Whereas if we just look at the most recent results between these two teams, where Palace won the last 2 home games against West Ham. So at home, they've been comfortable. I think they've won now 4 in a row at home. I think the last time that they've won 5 was back in 2001, if I remember correctly. If I remember that stat correctly. So it's been a very long time coming for them to have this type of winning streak. So they've been much more comfortable. I think the question would be, and I think Ray was very smart to kind of point it out, is what lineup we see, I think is definitely going to paint us a picture of what changes we may expect to see at the club. Because in their previous matchup for Palace, they played with the back 3 of both the rumored center halves, Mark Gahey and Joachim Andersen, alongside Chris Richards. It's kind of as 3 center halves. So if we see a shift of formation where one of those 2 are potentially dropped or both of them are, I think that's where we starting to get in trouble areas for Crystal Palace, because when you're looking at their bench and their depth in center half, there isn't much there, to be honest. You might see Jordan Ayew coming out playing center half for all we know, considering how he
come on.
But you know what I mean? Like they are as thin can be. It's quite, when you, again, I'll read off their rotational players that they had, and they didn't have any recognizable center half going into the last game as a substitution, because you're talking about Sarr, Lerma, Ayew, Edouard, Ducorte, Schlapp, Klein, and then a couple goalkeepers. So they're a very thin squad. So it would be, for me, I don't see any outgoings unless they can lock in an incoming, especially in the center half position. But I think we're going to learn a lot from this initial lineup. But if Crystal Palace are full strength, I think they have enough. They're in, even though, again, we're talking about form from last season. No Elise, I still think they're at a better area, kind of stage of their development, if I were to say, compared to West Ham right now, where I think that they very much are still kind of growing into their own. Obviously, 2 losses on the bounce to start the season under new management is probably not the greatest, most comfortable look right now for West Ham, but I think that is what's to be expected. So I do favor Palace, just given their attacking prowess, given how well they've played against this team historically, and them being at home.
Yeah, I mean, that 5-2 win that you're recounting, Mac, of course, came at the end of last season, where literally anything Crystal Palace was touching turned to gold, and then they were balling out that game against West Ham, who, give credit to them, their season was pretty much done by that time. So a lot to play for, I guess, both teams, and personnel for West Ham as well, because of course they, like you said, they're going to look to get a win out of the first 2 games this season. They do have Nicholas Fulkrug, like I mentioned. They coming in, will we see Crescencio Somerville make a start and sort of make his case to battle Jared Bowen and Mohamed Kudus for a starting berth. Paquetá looked all right. Of course, he did score the penalty, but will we see something more along the lines of James Ward-Prowse getting involved in midfield? And of course, former Crystal Palace player Gio, of course, very fond of, Aaron Wan-Bissaka could be starting for West Ham this game. So if it's Eze against Aaron Wan-Bissaka, it might be tough there.
Should be starting.
Should be starting, right?
No, there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
So, still a lot to play, and of course, we can still consider this a London derby, so we'll keep an eye out for that moving forward. I guess at this point, though, we're going to pick one of the remaining games each to discuss with sort of what we'll be looking out for. And for me, I'm going to go straight to it. I know we're not really going to talk much about the game, but Wolves versus Chelsea. The most recent news coming out today, João Felix has re-signed, I think, on a permanent with Chelsea. So that's great news from them. Another incoming player, but it looks like there will be an outgoing player there's an outgoing player in the shape of Conor Gallagher, who has signed for Atletico Madrid, but as well, Raheem Sterling's number has kind of been given up. So I guess I'll toss it to you first, Mac. What are your thoughts on sort of what's happening with Chelsea in the transfer window so far?
So I'm not a Chelsea fan. Let's all cards on the table. I think that's abundantly clear. But I think this is, if you are a Chelsea fan and obviously it's different. We're like, let's put it this way, we're like remote fans. We like parachute in coming from living in Toronto. We don't really understand like growing up, maybe the culture around a club and everything like that. But for me, that's always been the difference when we're talking about a lot of European sports, European clubs, soccer, football clubs growing up, where there is that sense of community, where it feels like since Todd Bowley's come in, Chelsea have kind of abandoned that philosophy. Because if we're looking at who are the players from the academy that they have not egregiously pissed off one way or another throughout the club, and that's really right now left over, it's just Reece James. Because considering what you forced out Conor Gallagher because you want to be able to make sure a player like Enzo Fernandez or Caicedo, players you spent hundreds of millions of pounds on, work. So you're shifting him out. You're giving up one of your kind of tenured players at the club, Todd Bowley's first signing, Raheem Sterling, and you're kind of throwing him under the bus because now reports have come out where, I don't know if you both have seen this, where that comment that he made that was released an hour before the game, that was actually made a couple of days earlier. But Chelsea agreed with the media to hold off on releasing that statement until that time period. So it looks more poor on Raheem versus on Chelsea themselves. So, and your players, they are like, yeah, Chilwell, you better find a new club. Chalobah, you better find a new club. You're talking about homegrown talents that you've invested in. Let's use this as an example, and compare and contrast clubs, to be completely transparent. And the club that you guys linked me to support with Arsenal, the difference between of what they've done, let's say Emile Smith Rowe, of how through all preseason you're kind of encouraging him, you're building him up, you're putting him in a position to be successful. This last game, you're making him captain of the team, kind of giving that send off a player if they are to move on because it's their best for their career. It's still with good intentions, and you're still kind of showing respect to a player. Where it feels like Chelsea have kind of lost that, and it's kind of like this from what you're kind of parachuting in. Like, is there any spirit of a club? Yeah, they have good players. I think a lot of us in our respective teams I would like to see a Caicedo on our team. Sure. But I don't want them to do well because it seems like they don't treat people well. And that's where I'm starting to cross the line. I know we talk a lot about more of the football and less about the personal community side of it. But now for me, hearing those reports and how they treated a lot of players like that rubs me the wrong way. So I'm very frustrated with, I guess, how Chelsea have gone about their business. And again, not my money, not my club, do whatever the fuck you want, but it seems like you're damaging a lot of people and a lot of people in your community.
I think that goes on without saying, and I definitely want to get Gio's point of view there. It's just my thing is, or gripe is, how will Chelsea sign any more players? Because now you've seen such a disaster with Raheem Sterling and Conor Gallagher, where they're essentially forcing them out amongst, like you said, Chalobah and Chilwell. If you're signing and you're willingly signing for Chelsea at this point moving forward, you know what you're going into, and it's not, of course, a conducive environment to team building. So honestly, whoever signs for them next, it's kind of like you kind of know what you're going into. And so,
no, I want to jump on that, but people still sign for them. That's the thing. We knew this a week ago, right? Has anything changed today from a week ago? Nothing. But for Pedro Neto signed, I don't know why. Like João Felix signed, I don't know why. I understand it didn't go well at Barca, so somebody needs to take him. But again, I don't. Did you guys see the Jamie Carragher comments where he's like he doesn't even know where he's going to get changed? Like,
yeah.
It's. I would be encouraging players, and I agree with it, to not sign for them. You're looking at getting guaranteed money because I think most of the contracts are like 7 years. So yeah, that's great. You're set up for life. Congratulations. If you got a 4-year contract, you're still set up for life, but you might enjoy your life as well. You know, there's the work-life balance, and it seems like a lot of players are just taking the money and running versus trying to figure out that life part, right? So yeah, sorry, but Gio, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously the simple answer is Todd Bowley has to balance the books, and the profits coming from homegrown talent, and at the end of the day, it has to be Conor Gallagher, has to be Chalobah, and you said Ray actually started off talking about Chelsea, it's a good thing for who? I think good thing for Atletico Madrid to get João Felix off the books, but good thing for who? They're still in the same scenario that they were last year. You have too many players. You don't know what to do with them. You don't know who to start. You don't know who your best 11 is. Who how does this fix any problems? And there's a reason why, it's not that Chelsea paid an enormous amount of money for Joao Felix. There's a reason why Atletico Madrid wanted to let him go so easily. And again, three times, not once, not twice, three times.
Yes.
And there was so many rumors at the start of the season where Chelsea said, "We don't want Joao Felix. You can take him back," but ended up signing him again. And then this whole saga with Conor Gallagher finally, getting off the books, in a separate deal, of course, for legality purposes or financial purposes. And then now, this whole Raheem Sterling thing is going on. It's okay to have some bad press, when you're winning, when the points are being racked up, when the goals are being scored. But hey, you're not doing any of that. If people thought Man U were in a rough spot, look, there's a new rough spot. There's a new bottom. Yeah, there's a new low. There's a new bottom, and that bottom is Chelsea. And unfortunately, it has been Chelsea for the last 2 seasons because of Todd Bowley and his outrageous spending. But hey, they are in the same predicament. They are in a hamster wheel right now, as I like to think of it, because you're running in a circle. You're running in the same spot actually, and you still haven't addressed any of your issues. So yeah. Yes, they played decently against Man City, but hey, that's the best news they've had for the last couple of weeks.
I want to. Sorry, I know I don't want to harp. I know I'm harping on this a lot. I apologize, but it's a lot of fun. Also very sad, but it's still a lot of fun. So the weird part is they still might be good, right? We don't know that. It could work out. It probably won't. Probably won't, right? We'll just assume. They still finished 6th last year, so they still got European football this season. So again, things in some ways, if you look at it from the right angle, it's good, but PR wise, it's gone horrible. And I still think that they're still not in that conversation. But when you're talking about like they're doing whatever they can to balance the books. So Ray, I know you watched Game of Thrones. I don't know if Gio did, but I also know Ray, you can't remember any characters from the show. But if you remember, there's a character, Stannis Baratheon. At one part, he's up north. He's trying to get to go south. There's a snowstorm coming in, and the Red Witch only tells him the only way you can get through this is with King's blood. So he sacrifices his daughter, still gets killed the next day, right? It's kind of like that. You're sacrificing your children to still lose in a lot of ways, and this is what Chelsea's doing with a lot of their homegrown players. So, again, to carry on along that analogy, Chelsea ain't getting the Iron Throne this season either, for sure. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Okay, well, enough of Chelsea. That will be an interesting one to watch. I'm going to toss it to you first, Mac, for any remaining games that you want to quickly point out and anything that you want to keep an eye out for that specific game.
One, and let's go. We'll go on the bright side. I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm looking at Tottenham and Everton, and I'm not actually looking at the game. I'm looking specifically at the memes, because I don't know if you've seen it. The one where Ange Postecoglou is like bent over, and he's replaced the rooster on top of the ball for the Tottenham logo.
Right.
And I'm curious to see if that continues, because if they lose or don't win against Everton, like I need like Jamie Vardy like parachute in to watch the game at some point, or let's do some sort of dance on the sidelines, or mimic the logo. I need something here, okay? And I think if we're talking about which game has the highest potential for laughs on Twitter after the game, I think it's Tottenham Everton. And I think both teams, you posed in the doc, right, can either teams get their first win of the season? My bet is actually no. I actually think it's going to be a 0-0 draw. I think it's going to get a boring game. I think it's going to get very frustrating, because Sean Dyche is going to be like, hey, you can't score. And Postecoglou is like, you guys can't attack. And it's going to be like, an unstoppable force moves an immovable object, but like the bad versions of them in a lot of ways. That's what I'm here for. That's potential in that game for it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tottenham go out and score a lot of goals. Who knows? But one serious note, I'm very interested to see about the Solanke position, because in that first game against Leicester, which we didn't cover because it happened before our podcast, he seemed like, to use kind of a hockey analogy, he was holding a stick too much, where he seemed very tight. He seemed very stressed. There's one moment where he did a good move, took a shot on, hit it straight at the keeper, where he could have easily slotted either side. It just seems like he knows he's coming in for a lot of money. He has that pressure. He needs to score. And if he had just gotten that moment in, it would have kind of eased off that pressure off. Where, again, going in team against Everton, where Tottenham are expected to win, if he doesn't perform and if he doesn't score, that further pressure just heaps on him and makes it worse. So very interested to see what happens. But again, for the meme game of the weekend, I'm looking at Tottenham and Everton. So I'm here for that.
That's a great shout. Great shout. Gio, of course, last but not least, any specific game that you're keeping an eye out for and for a specific reason?
Yeah. I say I'm not a gambler, but who doesn't like a little gamble here and there? But life's a gamble, folks. So, yeah, take the take the -2 on the Man City game, Ipswich Town. Ed Sheeran's gonna have a long afternoon. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, I'm taking the -2. The odds may not look great, but hey, I'm taking that because I think it's a lock. For those who say there's no such thing as a lock, yes, there is. It's this one. Ipswich Town. I just don't think I don't think it's hit them that I don't think they've had their welcome to the Premier League moment. They've been out for so long that they're going to really face a world-class side. And it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks. And I think Man City are really going to, take an early season lead in terms of the goal differential, really take advantage of this. And I think if I'm Pep, I'm really looking at Jeremy Doku and I'm saying, you need to torch this team. You need to get a goal, and you need this for your own confidence because you are good, but you tend to overcompensate and you tend to lose the ball quite a bit. I need you to play your best game of the season. Well, it's only been the second game, but I need you to have a world-class performance, and I think it would be a good opportunity for him to have that, just for his own personal confidence.
Quick question. I want to ask you. I want to need both. I know since we're talking about Ed Sheeran and Ipswich, I have to say this. So, what song is going to be most memed about Ipswich doing poorly with Ed Sheeran's music? Right? Do you know what I'm saying? So, do you remember at one point there was the meme where the person they were doing a track and field race and they're doing hurdles, and the person missed the hurdle, and then the song came in, it's like your legs don't work like they used to. I need like that, but Ipswich Town. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I need some of that. Like those. If we're talking about memes of what I need to see on Twitter, all you out there, please put in the work. I need a good laughs watching this game because we definitely know how the result's going to go. But on the bright side for Ipswich, they're going to get they have 2 weekends for they're going to go through cram courses of how football's played in the Premier League. So they're going to get their ass handed to them a second time, but it should put them in preparation. We're yes, these are 2 free hits. We're going to learn from this and we'll see you guys in the third week. Right. So.
Exactly. So thinking out loud, one of Ed Sheeran's favorite songs as well. It's going to be a tough one for Ipswich. This concludes our podcast for today, guys. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Next time you hear from us will be Tuesday when we review match week 2 of the Premier League. But until then, thank you, Mac, for joining us.
Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
Take care, guys.
See you guys.